to another episode of A Breath of Fresh Jacob, where I forgot to use the bathroom before I recorded this episode. I'll be right back. Much better. Today's question comes from Nacho Linguist. That's fun to say. Opinion on stamina in games. What would be a good use of limited stamina in games compared to a bad use, or if it should be implemented at all? This is one of those questions where it very, very heavily depends on not only the genre, but the game itself. An example of a game where limited stamina makes sense would be Dark Souls. If you didn't have a stamina bar in Dark Souls, you just dodge around like fucking crazy and just swing. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't give you the correct feeling of the game. That's not really what the game developers would have wanted you to experience, because it would have just been a disaster. So limited stamina in that situation, I think, is a good thing. I think it is implemented well for the most part. But of course, there isn't always going to be good implementation of this. I'll give you an example of a game I think that does stamina very poorly. Actually, two games that do it in exactly the same way. The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I think that the stamina wheel in those games is atrocious, and it should be done away with completely and utterly. It baffles me as to why they decided to keep that, of all things, from Skyward Sword. The idea of turning your exploration into a waiting game baffles me. Climbing a mountain shouldn't take as long as it does. Running from point to point shouldn't be well, I gotta wait for my stamina to come back before I can run again. That's boring. You want to explore. You want to do it at your own pace. You don't want the game to tell you, nope, you gotta slow down for a minute. Okay, you can run again. Okay, now stop. Okay, now move a little slower. Okay, now you can run again, and it's just, I don't understand why that's a thing. To me, that is bad implementation of stamina. In your question, you asked, should it be implemented at all? I think, again, it depends on the game. Dark Souls isn't the only example of stamina done well. There are a lot of other games, there's a lot of Souls-like games, not just like the Souls series, but ones that copy it, that also use a stamina bar. I would actually say, in a way, stamina in those kind of games is like mana or MP in a lot of RPGs. You have so much of it to use, but because you don't have unlimited, you have to decide how best to use it. And I think that when that is done correctly, it leads to really cool shit. I mean, look at most of the Final Fantasy games. I'm actually going to use Final Fantasy VIII as an example here, because of course I am. You know who I am.
Say my name.
You feel like you farted.
You're goddamn right.
In that game, you don't have MP. You don't have so much magic to use, and then you cast your spells as you need them. Each spell has its own quantity as though it were an item, and you expend that quantity of that particular spell. It would take me so long to go through all the complexities of Final Fantasy VIII's battle system, but just know that the way it does magic is very not normal, and it's a really bad example here, but I found my opportunity to plug Final Fantasy VIII in one of these episodes, and I'm fucking taking it!
Jacob.
This is the 7th week in a row you've shown
Final Fantasy VIII.
in class.
But a lot of games have, this spell costs 4 mana, this spell costs 10 mana, this spell costs 14 mana, and depending on your situation, will help you decide what you should and shouldn't do. I mean, hell, look at Paper Mario, or any of the Paper Mario games, really. If you have, like, flower points, you know, if you have these skills in battle that really dish out some serious damage, but you only have so much of it, and it doesn't replenish between fights, you need to not only think about the fight that you're in, but you need to think about 3 fights ahead to make sure you have enough FP for what might be coming. Maybe a mini-boss is coming. Not having enough MP for that fight, or FP in this case, you could easily die and lose a bunch of progress if you haven't saved recently. That's one of those scenarios where stamina, or MP, magic stamina, if you will, can be implemented really interestingly and really enhance the experience of the game. On the other hand, it can be done very poorly as far as, like, magic goes. Now, I'm actually going to use Final Fantasy VIII as an example again, because it can be done poorly. I think that the way that magic is done in Final Fantasy VIII is both amazing and terrible at the same time. Again, it would take a whole video series for me to explain everything about Final Fantasy VIII and why it is great and terrible all at the same time. But effectively, because your magic is separated into, let's say you have 100 fire, and you cast one, now you have 99 fire left, okay? One of the things in that game is it allows you to equip your magic onto your stats to boost your stats. So if you have a bunch of cure magic, you slap it on your health, boom, suddenly you have twice as much health. But if you start using that cure magic in battle, your stock dwindles, which means that you have less magic equipped to your health stat, which means your health goes down. So your maximum HP drops as you use healing spells, which makes it very hard to manage what you want to do with your spells. So what you end up doing is you equip a bunch of spells to your stats, and then you just don't use those spells, because you don't want to have to grind to get them back. So that is a way that I think it can be done poorly in the sense of a stamina or a magic stamina concept. Also, buy my shit, please! But not this one. Not this abomination. Not that one. You know, I gotta say, this is an interesting question, and it kind of made me think about how stamina relates to magic in a lot of RPGs. It wasn't really something I considered when I started talking about it at the beginning of the episode, so that's kind of cool. So thank you for that question, Nacho. It was really good. I'm happy that Mario Week is over now, so that's good. That's it. I'm just really happy that Mario Week's over. It was a good question, but it didn't take a whole lot to answer it, because good question, good answer. Whatever, I don't care. All right, I'm gonna fuck off and go do something. And just remember, chat, that saxophone solo from Baker Street. We'll see you next time.